Hello and welcome to The Crux, where we explore the most pressing issues facing the Church today. In this episode, we'll be discussing a topic that has stirred up quite a bit of controversy in theological circles: Open Theism and its implications for Orthodox Christianity. Open Theism challenges traditional views of God's foreknowledge and sovereignty, raising important questions about the nature of God and the relationship between divine providence and human free will. Is Open Theism a challenge to Orthodox Christianity? There are many reasons why I consider the topic of Open Theism and its implications for Orthodox Christianity to be important. Firstly, the topic speaks to some of the core beliefs and doctrines of Christianity, such as the nature of God, the role of human free will, and the problem of evil. By exploring the theological implications of Open Theism, one can deepen their understanding of these concepts and how they have been understood and debated throughout Christian history. Secondly, the topic of Open Theism raises important philosophical questions about the nature of time, causation, and determinism. These questions are not only relevant to theology, but also to broader debates in metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. Finally, the topic has direct historical implications, as the debate between Open Theists and traditional Christian theologians has been ongoing for several decades. By understanding the arguments and counterarguments made by both sides, one can better appreciate the historical context in which these debates have taken place, as well as how they continue to shape contemporary Christian theology and practice. In my opinion, the topic of Open Theism and its implications for Orthodox Christianity is important because it speaks to some of the core beliefs and doctrines of the Christian faith, raises important philosophical questions, and has direct historical implications. By engaging with this topic, one can deepen their understanding of these issues and their relevance to broader theological and philosophical debates. Open Theism, a relatively new theological concept, has emerged as a challenge to Orthodox Christianity. It raises fundamental questions about the nature of God, divine foreknowledge, and providence. In this essay, we will explore the key aspects of Open Theism, its historical and philosophical implications, and its impact on traditional Christian beliefs. To fully understand Open Theism, we need to examine the traditional Christian beliefs that it challenges. According to Orthodox Christian theology, God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and perfectly good. God's knowledge of the past, present, and future is complete, and God has complete control over all things. This belief in God's absolute foreknowledge and providence is an essential part of Christian doctrine. Open Theism challenges this traditional view of God by arguing that the future is not entirely fixed and that God's knowledge of the future is limited. Open Theists believe that the future is partly open and that God knows what could happen but does not know with certainty what will happen. They argue that God gave humans free will and that humans have the power to make choices that are not predetermined by God. As such, God's providence is not absolute, and God interacts with humans in a dynamic and flexible way. This idea of an open future raises significant philosophical and theological questions. If the future is partly open, how can God be all-knowing? How can God be in control if the future is not entirely predetermined? And if humans have free will, how can God be held responsible for the actions of humans? These are complex issues that Open Theists have explored in depth. One notable philosopher who has explored the idea of Open Theism is William Hasker. In his book, God, Time, and Knowledge, Hasker argues that the future is not entirely determined and that God's knowledge of the future is limited. He suggests that God's knowledge of the future is like our knowledge of the past. We know what happened, but we cannot change it. Hasker also argues that humans have genuine freedom to make choices and that God interacts with us in a way that respects our freedom. Richard Swinburne, in his book, The Coherence of Theism, argues that God's knowledge of the future is probabilistic rather than certain. He suggests that God has a general plan for the world, but that this plan is flexible and allows for human freedom. Swinburne also argues that the problem of evil is best addressed by the view that God allows humans to experience the consequences of their choices. Orthodox Christian theologians and scholars have responded to Open Theism with objections and criticisms. They argue that the traditional view of God's foreknowledge and providence is essential to Christian doctrine and that Open Theism is a departure from this tradition. They also argue that Open Theism undermines the nature of God and reduces God to a finite being with limited knowledge and power. One of the most significant objections to Open Theism comes from the philosophy of time. According to the traditional Christian view, God exists outside of time and therefore has complete knowledge of all events, past, present, and future. Open Theists, however, argue that God is a temporal being who experiences time in a way similar to humans. This view is controversial because it raises questions about the nature of God and how God relates to the world. Philosophers have also explored the implications of open theism for the problem of evil. If God does not have absolute control over events in the world, how can God be held responsible for the existence of evil? Open theists suggest that God allows humans to experience the consequences of their choices and that some events are the result of human free will. This view challenges the traditional Christian belief that God is responsible for all things, including evil. Other philosophers have explored the ethical implications of open theism. If humans have free will, how do we reconcile that with the idea of God's plan for our lives? What is the role of prayer and worship if God does not control all things? These are questions that require careful consideration and reflection. Open theism has generated significant philosophical discussion and debate. Philosophers have explored the implications of open theism for the problem of evil, the nature of God, the philosophy of time, and the ethics of free will. While some Orthodox Christian theologians have objected to open theism as a departure from traditional Christian beliefs, the concept continues to be a significant development in contemporary Christian theology that demands ongoing reflection and exploration. As we conclude this episode of The Crux, it's important to reflect on the significance of our discussion about open theism. The theological challenges raised by this concept have profound implications for how we understand God and our place in the world. It's crucial that we engage in thoughtful and respectful dialogue about these issues, even as we recognize the potential for disagreement and controversy. We hope this episode has encouraged you to reflect on these important questions and to continue exploring them in your own theological journey. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more engaging discussions on the most pressing issues facing the church today. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon on The Crux.